recording is ready. And so here we are on a cool, still summer day morning for our mindful mat Pilates practice. Um, and yeah, so the usual stuff that we use for our practice. Um, and I was gonna have us actually begin with a cat cow. So before we get to that position, why don't you find a way to sit that's comfortable for you, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and plunk myself down as we usually do at the end of class and sit on a yoga block, but you can sit on whatever's comfortable. Don't think it has to be like a fancy way of sitting. And I thought before we get on our hands and knees, it might be good to just kind of loosen up the hands and the forearms and the wrists. So we'll do a couple of movements to accomplish that. So from a sitting or a standing position, whatever's comfortable for you, go ahead and interlace your fingers and then let your palms touch each other, right? So your fingers are interlaced and your palms are touching, and you want to just relax through your neck and shoulders to the best of your ability, because what you'll notice is there will be some movement, some passive movement that you'll experience in your shoulders when you do this motion to loosen up your wrists. And so with your fingers interlaced and your palms touching, just do some circling, right? And feel free to hold your arms in a way that's comfortable for you, right? So if you hold your arms up really high, that might not be very comfortable. So hold your arms in a way that's comfortable for you. And what I'm doing is just kind of circling, making a circular-ish type of a movement. And I don't have my fingers gripping. They're interlaced, but I'm also trying to be relaxed. And I'm just circling through a movement that's opening up what I would describe as the back of the wrist, right? So the part of the wrist that you can see when you look at your watch. And then there you are moving in a particular pattern or direction. So then see if you can figure out how to reverse that direction, right? Again, keeping the shoulders relaxed and to the best of your ability. So your arms are just kind of moving around as you are circling and loosening up your wrists. And then another movement that we can do if we pause that is we can keep our fingers interlaced, right? And we can reach our arms away from us and press the palms away from us, and that just nice and gentle, we can stretch and open up the palms of the hands and elongate the fingers. No pressure. We don't want to hurt anything, but we're opening up the underside or the back of the wrist. And then we can actually flip that around so we can see the palms of our hands, fingers still interlaced. And now we're back to opening up the back of the wrist. So you can press your hands away from you this way to give your palms and the undersides of your fingers a stretch. And then you can go that way to reverse that. So we're just trying again to make it so that it's less uncomfortable when we're on our hands and knees. Now, go ahead and shake out your arms, release your fingers, and really let everything relax. And when you shake your arms, you want to feel your flesh jiggle, right? So really nice and loose. And we're going to try one more movement together with interlaced fingers. So after we do the shaking, let's come back and re-interlace the fingers. And we're going to begin by holding our arms in this way where your elbows are wide and your palms are facing down. And we're going to see if we can figure out how to make a wave. And the wave is going to require some looseness in our chest and shoulders. So in order to make the wave, we start to lift one elbow, we let the wrist flex, we let the other elbow drop, then we shift. right? Wrist comes up and an elbow comes up, right? So we have alternating picking up and lowering of the elbows. And you can see that when you do this movement, the palms are separated and then the fingers fold and the palms fold together and then the palms separate again. So we're just playing with how to flex through the shoulders and the elbows and the wrists and the fingers to make this wave-like pattern. And so flexibility in our wrists is not just flexibility in our wrists, is it? It really has to do a lot with our whole arm system. Now, the first direction that you went, right, if you were trying to mirror me, might not have been your natural way of doing it, so it may have felt awkward. So let's reverse it. This is my awkward direction, right? I'm naturally going to just do the thing that feels easiest to my body. So now I'm going to figure this out going the other way, where I pick up that elbow and then I switch over to the other one. So this is a little bit more awkward for my nervous system to go in this direction. So I'm just taking it slow. And remember, the point is that I'm trying to stretch and relax, flexing my fingers, flexing my wrists, moving through my shoulders, just nice and free, free through the elbows and the arms, creating this wave-like pattern that liberates the hands and the wrists. Just take your time. It can be difficult to figure out a movement like this without a mirror. I certainly practiced it watching myself in a mirror so I could figure out what I was doing. But eventually we just get a feeling for what it is to make a wave. And then go ahead and relax and separate your fingers and give your arms a nice loose shake. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful for you to come out onto your hands and knees, right? And so let's get off of whatever we were sitting on and set that off to the side. And now let's come on to our hands and knees. And if this is still difficult for you to be on your hands, then you may simply need to make a fist, right, when you're in this position. And so now what we're going to do is figure out how to make a wave in our spine. So we're on our hands and knees in what we would call a quadruped position. And let's start way down at the tailbone. So let's begin by curling the tailbone under. And so we'll feel that cat-like sensation in the spine with the chin tucked. Now starting at your tail, reverse that, coming into extension, finishing at the head, and then beginning at the tail, coming into flexion, starting again at the tail, moving into extension. So we're always coming back to the tailbone and finishing at the skull. And again, you notice that in order to make a wave in your spine, your hip joints have to be free. We didn't do that yet. Your shoulders have to be free. And your spinal joints have to be free. Let's try one more spinal wave. Not an easy thing to do. And then let's come back to neutral and come off of our hands and knees and onto our backs with one yoga block. So we're going to turn and come onto our backs with our legs flexed and our feet flat on the mat and a yoga block between the knees and your arms down onto the mat with your palms touching the ground. Palms touching the ground. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is another wave-like movement for the spine,
but we're gonna use the shoulder bridge, um, sort of the shoulder bridge position to do a wave with our spine. So we've done shoulder bridges, which is a partial wave, but now we're going to actually add a new element to doing a shoulder bridge. Again, the idea is to try to free up not just the joints of the spine, but also the other aspects of the body that are impacted by either having a more flexible spine or a stiffer spine, right? So, with your arms on the ground and your feet on the floor and the yoga block hugging between your knees, we're going to begin at the tailbone and start to move through the spinal column, lifting up, rising up to the top, right? Now, normally we reverse and we go back down the same way that we came up, but this is going to be different. What we're going to see if we can do is lower the tail first, lower the tailbone back down, and then allow the spine to resettle on the mat. So the tailbone comes up first, and we rise up into shoulder bridge, but now the tailbone comes down first. And what that means is that we're going to feel some extension in our spine because we have to arch our spine in order for the tailbone to come down before everything else does. So the tailbone comes up first, and then we gently arch the back to allow the tailbone to come back down first. So please take your time with this. If you haven't warmed up before class, you might feel a little bit stiff. So just go easy on yourself, right? You are strengthening the muscles of your body, right? You're also trying to find a little bit more supple quality or freedom in your spine. Let's do that one more time. This wave like shoulder bridge going up, and then tailbone comes down and we relax everything back down. Now, one of the things that you might have noticed when you do a bridge wave leading on the way down with the tailbone is you feel your back muscles. And sometimes feeling our back muscles can be nervous for people, especially if you've had a sore back or an injury. So I just want to share with you that I felt a lot of work in my back muscles doing that variation. But I know that my back is healthy and that it's normal for me to feel my back muscles working because I'm using my back muscles, right? So it's okay to feel your back working, just the way it's okay to feel your abdominal muscles working. It's okay to feel your legs working, right? So that's a part of using the body. Just noticing if there's an association for you, some fear when it comes to using your back, and just see if you can pay attention to that, right? And try to avoid that gripping response that sometimes comes along and let the muscles work. Now, let's leave the block where it is. And let's interlace our fingers and bring our hands behind our head, picking up our elbows so that the arms are slightly lifted away from the floor. And let's feel a little bit of activity in this area of the armpit where we're using muscles to hold the arms in this orientation. Okay. And now supporting the back of your head and keeping your arms in this fixed position. Let's take a deep breath in, and as we exhale, we're going to lift the head and the back of the chest as we squeeze the block. And then we're going to lower back down. So we're just doing a little bit of flexion of the upper body, which also requires some flexibility in the spine. So we're just flexing on the exhale and releasing slowly on the inhale. We feel our muscles of our abdomen contracting and then slowly letting go in order to flex the spine and unflex the spine, right? So just like we felt the back muscles working in the bridge wave, now we feel the abdominals working in this spinal flexion. Let's do two more of those, gently flexing the muscles to flex the spine and relaxing. And one more time. And then lowering the head and releasing the head to the mat and letting those arms come back down onto the mat. Check and make sure that your yoga block is still in a good spot, that your feet aren't crowding your buttocks. And now let's go back and just do a traditional shoulder bridge, right? So we'll take a deep breath in together. And on the exhale, beginning with the tailbone, start to raise the spine up off of the mat, coming all the way up into your bridge. Take a breath at the top. And then reverse and come back down from the top to the bottom. Just the standard way of doing a bridge. Taking a breath in. And on the exhale, rising up into shoulder bridge, pressing the backs of the arms into the floor, and then lowering back down. Now, even in this standard bridge, we can still feel that there is a slight supple quality to the movement of the spine, certainly not as much as we felt in the wave. But we still are freeing up all of the neighboring spinal joints, right? You don't necessarily think of your spine as having joints, but your spine has over 24 joints. Rising up and lowering down, and let's take that one more time. So just a nice, gentle feeling, a supple quality of moving up into the bridge, taking a deep breath, and then lowering all the way back down out of the bridge. Let's go ahead and remove the block for a moment and let those legs rock a little bit from side to side. So we feel a little bit of leg movement at the hip socket, as well as a little bit of rocking side to side of the pelvis. Now let's pay a little bit more attention to those hip joints. So let's put the block back between the knees, the arms back down onto the floor with your palms touching the ground. And we're going to do a movement of loosening up the region of the hip joints, but we're going to start at the pelvis, at the junction of the pelvis and spine, and the junction of the leg bones to the pelvis, right? So this pelvic lumbar area. And so what we're going to do is not a bridge, although it kind of fits in the family of a bridge. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to only lift one buttock off the floor, right? Let's get rid of the block, actually, because that just feels a little bit in the way. So set the block off to the side. And you might just have to take a peek if this isn't clear to you. So what I'm going to do is press into my left foot, and I'm going to just lift my left buttock off the floor only. And then I'm going to lower that buttock back down. So only my left buttock comes off the floor as I press into my left foot. And then my left buttock comes back down. And so what this feels like is I notice this little shifting between the left side of my pelvis and the right side of my pelvis that feels a little bit, it's a little bit like a twist, but it also has a little bit of a feeling of a shift, like backwards and forwards, one side relative to the other, right? As I lift my left buttock off the ground, pressing through my left foot, and I also feel a little shifting between my legs. But what I really am interested in is movement in this pelvic, lumbar, hip joint area. Just trying to loosen up at the base of the trunk. And now let's relax that left side and try it with the right side. So you press into your right foot and you raise your right buttock off the floor and then you relax it back down. And another way I could describe the feeling of doing this is it feels like my right thigh almost feels like it's getting a little bit longer when I do this. Nothing else is lifting up. I'm not focusing on trying to lift up my spine. It's about being able to do something with your leg by pressing through your foot that sort of rocks and shifts the right half of your pelvis and causes your right buttock to come up off of the ground. It feels a little bit like a twist, a little bit like a shift, a little scissory maybe between the legs. And then relax that right buttock onto the floor. Now what we're going to do is try and alternate between the left and the right. So you press into your left foot and you lift your left buttock and set it down, and then you press into your right foot and raise your right buttock and then set it down. So you're pressing into your foot and your left buttock comes up and you set it down, and then you shift to the right. So there's a feeling of left and right, and you might notice some activity in your glutes, alternating between the right and the left. And if you know your anatomy, what you might realize is that you are loosening up the junction between your pelvis and your sacrum. I know at least one of you is going to catch on with this. And let's do that one more time from side to side. And then pause in the center. Now, let's go back to doing a normal shoulder bridge. So put the block back between your knees. We're going to do a normal shoulder bridge and just see how it feels, the movement feels through our pelvic region. So let's come up, just starting with the tailbone and rising up into a bridge. And just like we usually do, we come back down the same way. We come back down from the top to the bottom. So we're rising up from the tailbone up to the shoulders, and then we reverse that. We go down from the shoulders and through the tailbone. But just notice how things are feeling through the region of your hips. If things are starting to feel like they move a little bit better. And then lower all the way back down. Take the block out and let those legs rock a little bit from side to side. Now let's come back to center and place the block back between our knees with your arms down on the mat, palms down onto the floor. And I'd like you to rise up into a shoulder bridge. Okay, so you're up into a bridge. And without dropping the block, what we're going to try to do is kind of a circular movement for the pelvis. So we're going to slightly shift the pelvis to the left, lower it down towards the floor, pick it up towards the right, and lift it through the center. So we're moving the pelvis around. It goes to the left, it lowers down towards the mat, it moves to the right and comes back up again. And what I'd like you to notice once you get the feeling of this, of circling your pelvis around, coming out of the bridge and then back up into the bridge, is what this is doing to your upper back. So notice that there's a lot of movement potentially in your upper back As you circle your pelvis around, slowly in bridge. And then see if you can introduce a little feeling of assistance through your arms and your shoulders as you do this motion. So you start to feel some shifting through your chest from right to left as you do this circling with your pelvis. The next time you come down onto the floor, I'd like you to pause and take out the block and just let your legs rock from side to side. It's a new thing, so sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure it out. And sometimes when we learn something new, we tend to work harder than we need to, right? So efficiency of movement comes with practice and repetition. So just take it easy on yourself, right? Try not to do it too quickly, and you can do a smaller movement to sort of figure it out. Now let's come back and put the block back between our knees. Arms on the floor, palms down. We're going to lift back up into a bridge position. This is where we started. Now shift your pelvis to the right, lower down, grazing the floor, shift it over to the left, and then pick yourself back up again. Shift to the right, lower down, grazing the mat, shift to the left, and come back. So you're moving through your pelvis, but you can also feel that there is a complementary movement through the chest and shoulders. And so if it feels good to you to get your chest and shoulders gently involved with this circling, go ahead and do that. You're going to feel work in your back muscles. Let's try a couple more. Shifting around, circling, loosening up, strengthening and loosening, regaining mobility. And the next time you're on the mat, stop, take out the block, and this time lift your feet, take a hold of your knees, and gently cradle your legs in your hands, your knees or shins in your hands, and begin to make a circular motion, massaging your back and the back of your pelvis into the floor. Now, as you hold your knees and make the circling motion, notice what you're doing with your shoulders. Do you lift your shoulders towards your ears, or are you using the muscles of your arms to bend your elbows to pull your legs closer to your chest as you do the circle? So noticing how you use your upper body. Let's reverse the direction of those circles. Take it one more time around. And then release those feet to the mat. So we drifted down my mat a little bit. So I'm going to get myself back into my working space. Let's straighten the left leg onto the mat, and you can either point or flex your foot, whatever feels better for your body. Let your right arm rest on the floor. Take your left hand behind your head. So your left leg is straight, your right leg is bent, and your right foot is on the mat. Your right arm is on the floor, and your left hand is behind your head, your left arm slightly lifted away from the ground. Keeping your upper body mobile and your lower body steady. On the exhale, we're going to peel our upper back off the floor and twist slightly to the right, and then release all the way back down. Exhaling as we lift and rotate slightly to the right and back down. Now just notice how this strengthening movement feels in your body, right? I feel like I actually have better range of motion right now after doing all of those loosening up warm-ups, right? This isn't an action that has a particularly large range of motion, but I definitely feel like I'm moving a little bit more freely from the previous exercises. I hope you are feeling something similar. Let's do two more. A little bit of flexion with rotation. And then release that head. Let your left arm rest on the floor. Bend the left leg. Straighten the right leg. Take your right hand behind your head and lift your right arm slightly off the ground. Again, it's your choice whether you point your right foot or you flex your right foot. Now, let's start with a deep breath in, and as we exhale, we're going to flex forward and rotate to the left, and then release back down, keeping the lower body steady. One of the things I feel like I am more connected to this morning is the feeling, the connection of this movement to the musculature of my lower trunk. Sometimes I really only feel this in a more isolated way, but now I can really feel the connection to my pelvis. And I feel like maybe the bridge variations that we did helped to light up that connection. Exhaling as you flex forward and twist to the left, and inhaling as you release. Let's do two more. And one more time. And then releasing all the way back down. Great. Now, let's go ahead and turn to our sides. And let's come back up onto our hands and knees for a moment. Okay, so coming up onto our hands and knees, setting ourselves up in a quadruped position. That's a four-pointed stance. Now, when we were here at the beginning of the practice, we had loosened up our shoulders a little bit, but and wrists, but we hadn't loosened up our hips. So let's go ahead and revisit that bridge, that wave cat-cow, okay? So starting from a neutral position, let's begin by curling the tailbone under, rounding the spine and tucking the chin. Now from the tailbone, let's reverse that like a wave. Let's move through into extension. Starting from the tailbone, let's move into flexion. Starting from the tailbone, let's move into extension. So now that we did some of those movements through the pelvis and the hip joints, I'm definitely feeling less stiff in my lower body as I go through this wave cat-cow. Let's take that one more time. And then find our way back to neutral, okay? And let's come off of our hands and shake out our arms. Now, I'd like to do another movement to loosen up the upper body, okay? But my arms are too long for me to do this sitting on a yoga block. So what I'm gonna do is kneel, okay? So I'm just gonna come into a kneeling position. And if kneeling isn't comfortable for you, you can do this standing up. It doesn't matter, okay? I'm just gonna kneel because if I stand, I'm going to disappear from the way that I set up my camera this morning. So from a kneeling or a standing position, just allow your arms to hang down by your sides. And what we're going to do is, it's called a shoulder circle, Okay, so it's in the family of a circular movement. And you think about your shoulder joints, you're going to use all these various muscles, right, of your upper body to move your shoulder joints around in a circle, right? So we use the muscles around the front of the chest, the back of the chest, the sides of the chest, right? The top of the shoulder, below the shoulders, all these different muscles that allow us to do this circular motion. And I feel a little bit of passive movement of my spine, but the primary feeling is to circle through the bits and parts of the shoulder system and then let those muscles relax. Okay. Now, making sure that you're not going to crash into anything, we're going to do a movement of our arms that's also going to move the bits and parts of our shoulders. So we're going to reach our arms forward with our palms connected and then spread out the fingers and reach all the way back and let our arms come down. So we'll bend the elbows, palms come together, reach the arms forwards, open up, right? Reaching back and circling down. The hands find each other. They swim forward, they spread apart and open and come around. And then we bring the hands together, spread them apart, and we come back around. Notice that there is a flexion and extension of your elbows. There's movement in your shoulders. There's a stretch for your fingers and your hands and the front of your chest as we learn another new movement to liberate the potentially sticky tissues of our upper body. Let's do that one more time. And then just let those arms relax and shake everything out. Really, really nice. Now, let's come on to our sides. So let's grab both of our yoga blocks. We're going to use one yoga block for our head and one yoga block in front of us, which we may or may not need. So let's begin with our hips, knees flexed, right? So our legs are stacked and kind of in a tabletop position sideways. And then either allow your top arm to rest alongside your body, right, down the side of your body, or you could take your top arm, if this doesn't bother your shoulder, and you could slip your hand around your head. So you're kind of giving your head a little bit of support. So you could have your arm wrapped around your head, or you could have your arm on your side. Okay, whatever works for your body. So we're going to go ahead and work on engaging the muscles along the side of our trunk. So as we exhale, we'll flex those muscles, contract those muscles to bend a little sideways, and then slowly release that effort. And I'm not pulling on my head. I'm not trying to bend my neck a lot. I really want the bigger part of my body, the bigger part of my trunk to get a little bit more unstuck. So I want my ribs to flex or bend, want my spine to flex a little bit. So I'm just trying to use my muscles to strengthen this movement of bending sideways, improve that movement. Not working too hard, working just the right amount. And let's do that once or twice more, flexing sideways. And then releasing the head back down to the block. Great. Now, let's kind of come out of that tabletop and open up the hip joints just a little bit. The legs are still stacked and they're still what we would consider bent. We just gave our thighs a little bit more distance from our belly. Okay. And then what I'd like you to do is to lift both of your feet just a wee bit off of the floor, right? The side of your bottom leg is still on the ground. And then let's just go ahead and open the space between the knees and close that space. And I'd like you to notice if you feel like you need to try to really push this top leg further than it seems like it wants to go. So what we want to experience is a nice feeling of mobility in the hip joint, even if your knees barely move away from each other. So in other words, we don't need to try to force a greater range of motion. We just want to sustain what we have. Let it feel nice and light and easy in here to move, and that work is coming from your butt. And let's do one more. And then relax the knees together and let the feet come down onto the floor. Now we're going to work the muscles that surround this top hip joint in a different way, right? So your knees will continue to rest against each other, but your top foot is going to come up and your leg will feel like it's twisting a little bit forwards. And there are muscles here around your hip and upper thigh that are responsible for this motion, right? They pull the leg into this internal rotation. And we don't want to force anything. We're just trying to get this movement to happen. Let's do a couple more of those. And then relax that foot back down. Now, let's go ahead and straighten out that top leg and point the foot if that's possible for you. Still on your side, let's go ahead and make a circle. And I would encourage you to reduce the size of your circle. So we're not making a gigantic circle. We're making a modest circle that feels free, not tight or restricted. And there is an effort in the muscles that surround the hip to make this motion happen. So breathe and make sure that you're delivering oxygen to those working muscles. Let's go ahead and reverse the direction of this modest circle. Take your time. Right? My muscles are talking to me. They're getting a little cranky on the side of my hip. I'm just taking it easy and sort of sending some encouragement down into that part of my body. Let's take one more circle around and then allow that leg to rest right on top of the other leg. And if you feel like you need to rub out that hip, go ahead and rub out that hip. Good. Now, from this position, right, with again, you don't want to have your thighs too close to your belly. We're going to keep our legs firmly connected to one another. We're going to need to press against this block because we're going to do a twist. And so the very top of our trunk is going to stay steady on the mat. And what we're going to do is pick up the bottom leg, right? So we're rotating with our legs connected. We rotate backwards and we lower back down. And now we lift those feet and we rotate forwards, right? And we're feeling that work through the trunk. And then we're rotating forwards. And we're not trying to force the body to turn more than it can. We're just trying to find that supple quality of rotation through the trunk. And let's take that one more time in each direction. Backwards rotation and forwards rotation, and then lower down. Now, we're going to come up, same side of the body, and we're going to position ourselves on our bottom arm. So we've got weight in our elbow and our forearm and our hand. Our elbow is positioned so that our shoulder has good support. Our bottom leg is bent and our top leg is straight. Okay. And what we're going to try to figure out now is, how do we get this bottom hip off of the ground? So I really want to use the strength of my trunk and my legs as much as possible. I have a foot and then another foot and a leg in contact with the ground versus this single arm. So choosing to lift yourself from one arm when you've got two legs and a trunk would be misguided. So try to figure out how to use the strength of your legs and your trunk to raise your hip off the ground and then reach over and then lower back down. Right? So partly how to recruit your legs is going to have to do with how you've got your legs positioned, particularly your bottom leg, your bent leg, right? If that leg is not close enough to your trunk, then it might not be easy to use if it's way down there. You might find that it's easier to use this leg if it's closer to your arm, right? So just raising and lowering. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm pushing through my legs to find this lift. I'm not forcing a stretch, just doing what feels good for my body and then lowering all the way back down. That was a lot of stuff on one side, so let's go ahead and try it on the other side. We're going to bring both of our blocks with us. We'll use one block for our head and reserve one block for our top hand when we get to the point where we need that block. So we're going to begin by flexing the trunk sideways. So I gave us two options for the top arm. You can let that arm rest along the side of your body, right? Or you can take that arm and bring it around your head. Doesn't matter to me. You do what is comfortable for you, right? You'll still use the right muscles. So I'm just going to take my arm over because I like how that feels. And then on the exhale, we're going to use our muscles to flex our trunk sideways and then slowly release. So the effort is a contraction of the muscles on the top side of the body, the side of the body that's bending. And we're experiencing, hopefully, a feeling of release from the muscles that are on the floor, from that side of the body, so that it's easier for you to bend your body sideways, right? And I'm purposefully avoiding doing too much work with my neck. Let's do a couple more. And then we'll lower down and release that top arm. Now we're going to move our legs a little bit, right? So that your thighs are not quite so close to your abdomen, okay? And then with the legs stacked, we'll pick up our feet a little bit off the floor and we'll begin to do what people call a clam, where you open and close the distance between your knees. This is a movement that helps to ensure mobility of the hips and of course strengthens the muscles of the hips. And I am intentionally stopping the movement of my top leg when I first encounter the end point. I'm not trying to force my leg to move another degree. I'm just opening and closing, opening and closing. I can feel the work in my butt muscles. Contracting and slowly disengaging. Let's do a couple more. Maintaining healthy hip function. And then close the knees and rest the feet down. Great. Now, keep your knees in contact with each other, and your top foot is going to move away from the bottom foot, and you'll feel a little bit of what we call internal rotation. And so for me, I was born with limited internal rotation. So some people's legs will twist a lot more in this direction than mine does. This is as far as mine goes, right before my whole body starts to twist. It probably has to do with just the way that the shape of all the bits in my hip socket and how they developed, and that's just how it is. So I'm not going to try to force more movement. I'm just going to do what my body can do it smoothly and with control to maintain what range of motion I have in internal rotation. Let's do one more. And then let that foot relax. Now extend that top leg, pointing the foot. Now we're going to circle the leg, not too big, right? Not too big of a circle, just a nice smooth circle around, maintaining good muscle tone in your legs so that your knees stay stable and straight. And I can feel that these muscles are a little bit fatigued. I'm just going to breathe deeply and send some encouragement down there. Let's reverse the circles. Not too big, not too much lift, just a nice smooth circle. One more time around, and then we'll let that leg rest on top of the bottom leg. Now, we're going to need the block because we're going to twist. We're going to keep the legs connected to each other. And now the effort of this twisting is going to come more up into our trunk, more into our trunk muscles. So using the block, right, we're going to pick up that bottom leg and twist our mid to lower body backwards, and then lift the feet and twist our mid to lower body forwards. So you'll still feel a little bit of work in the muscles of your hips, but now you'll feel work through your trunk. And even though I'm not letting the very uppermost portion of my torso rotate, I can still feel that there's a need for some flexibility in my uppermost body in order to get a nice feeling of rotation. I'm not forcing it, just controlling it back and forth. And let's do one more of each movement. And then lower down. Now, to the final movement is a lift. So we're going to move our blocks out of the way, and we're going to come onto our bottom forearm. Elbow, forearm, and hand are our contact point. We want to make sure we've got this bottom arm positioned so that our shoulder is stable. The bottom leg is flexed and the top leg is straight. And you want to make sure you pull this bottom leg up a bit, because the closer it is to your belly, the easier it is to recruit the leg to help get this bottom hip off of the ground. Again, remember, we've got a single arm here, right? But we have two legs and a core. So let's try to work from the legs and the core more than the arm and the shoulder to raise this hip off of the ground, okay? So let's start to work with how do we get that lift to come from the strength of the core and the pelvic area and the legs versus feeling the work in the shoulder. That's not to say that you're not going to feel something in your shoulder. You are going to feel something in your shoulder, but you absolutely should feel a lot happening elsewhere. Let's take a couple more, just nice and easy. I'm not doing anything dramatic, just up and down. And one more time with control, raising and lowering and all the way back down. Let's move our blocks out of the way and come on to our bellies. And then once you're on your belly, what I'd like you to do is bring your legs together to touch and overlap your hands so that you can rest your forehead on top of your hands. And then with your legs together and touching, I'd like you to go ahead and bend both of the knees so that your toenails are facing straight up towards the ceiling. Legs are touching, feet are touching, okay? Now, keeping your legs in contact the entire time, begin to make a circular motion through your legs. And your knees are going to bend less and more. So they'll open and close as you circle around from right to left. You'll feel movement in your hip sockets. You'll also feel a little bit of passive movement between your pelvis and your rib cage through that lumbar region. Let's take it one more time around, pausing in the center, and then reverse. So my feet are kind of sliding against each other, and that's okay. They're still in contact as I make this closed leg circular motion. Strengthening the muscles along the back side of the body and mobilizing the joints. Let's take it one more time around. Pausing in the center and then placing the tops of the feet down onto the mat with your legs in parallel. Okay, now let's bring the arms down by our sides, but we're going to have our arms bent. So your elbows are bent, your palms are on the ground, and your elbows and forearms are also on the ground, right? So take a look, make sure that your elbows aren't in the air. Your elbows are on the mat, your forearms are on the mat. This requires mobility in your shoulder joints just to have your arms in this position. Now, with your arms in this position, I'd like you to lift your chest a little bit away from the ground, right? So your face is not smashed into the mat. And give your legs and buttocks a good squeeze. So you've got a nice anchor in this position, right? And now what we're going to try and do is slide one arm along the floor, sliding it up. Your elbow will lift if your elbow straightens, but when you pull your arm back down by your side, your elbow should come back down onto the mat. Slide your arm forward to straighten. Slide your arm back to flex. Slide your arm forward to straighten. Slide your arm back to flex. Now, if you notice a lot of change in the position of your upper body when you're pulling your arm back down by your side, what that means is that the tissues of your shoulders aren't changing enough, right? If you have to twist and lift and move your body out of the way to retract your arm, then that means that your shoulder is really stiff. So the the more you can hold your body steady, that helps to actually liberate your shoulder tissues. I feel a lot of work in my backside. Let's take it one more time for each arm, sliding up and sliding down, sliding up and sliding down. And then let's just go ahead and slowly roll over onto our backs. Just roll over onto your back, right? Bend your knees and put your feet flat on the mat so you're not holding onto your knees yet. You're just holding here with your arms resting. And take a couple of deep breaths. So that particular exercise that we just did really got my back muscles kind of supercharged. So just resting in this position allows my back muscles a little bit of time to start to release before I pull my knees to my chest. And that ensures that I don't strain my back muscles by bringing my knees to my chest too quickly. So now if your back feels like it is pretty much recovered, then go ahead and pick up your feet and take a hold of your shins or your knees. And again, when you take a hold of your shins or your knees, notice how you hold your legs. Do you do it by bringing your shoulders to your ears, or are you holding with your chest and arms and your shoulders are relatively relaxed and spaciously away from your ears? Let's go ahead and introduce a circling movement, right? Another opportunity for you to notice your pattern of engagement regarding your shoulders and your arms. So when I'm circling like so, I'm flexing and unflexing at my elbows, and I feel activity in my chest muscles, but I'm purposefully avoiding pulling my shoulders up to my ears. Let's go ahead and reverse the direction of those circles. And pause, just holding your right leg, extend your left leg down onto the floor. Take a hold of your right leg in a way that makes sense for your body. So you can grab under the thigh, over the shin, whatever works for you. And just hold your leg against your belly. Again, if it doesn't feel good to pull your leg straight against your belly, which causes the front of my hip to get pinchy, I tend to hold my leg just a little bit more to the side, and then that feels really nice for my body. Okay? So you hold your leg in a way that makes sense for your body. You're just giving yourself a little bit of a stretch for the front of that left hip. And then let's change legs. Extend the right leg out, take a hold of the left leg, hold it in a way that doesn't cause you to feel any pain or discomfort in your left hip joint. And you're just giving that right anterior hip a little bit of a stretch. And then release that left leg to the ground. Let your arms relax. Let's just lay here for a moment and take a couple breaths. And when you feel ready, you can bend your knees and roll yourself to your side and begin to pick yourself up and make your way to a seat. I'm going to end the recording for our friends who need the recording later, or anybody who needs a recording later.